Bernie Sanders just exposed the truth about Gaza. In Congress, they shut him down. Let's dive in. Hi guys, welcome back to The Baseline. Thanks for joining me again today. So, every single day, people in Gaza are being shot, just trying to get food. Not trying to get weapons, not rockets, not bread, nothing like that, right? And instead of stopping it, the United States Senate just voted to keep sending more bombs. Now, this isn't foreign policy. It's complicity at this point. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Should the United States cut military aid to Israel until the siege on Gaza ends? Yes or no? Tell me why you guys think one way or another about it. But this episode is big, right? Because a United States senator, a Jewish senator, just tried to hold Israel accountable for its use of American weapons. And the Senate, they ended up saying no. And what makes this even more insane, for the first time in U.S. history, a majority of Democrats actually broke ranks. They tried to block the arms. But it wasn't enough, but it was close. So that's something, especially for Democrats. So if you're ever wondered who actually controls U.S. foreign policy, buckle up, because we're digging into three brutal unanswered questions. One is, why did Congress vote to keep arming a government that's been credibly accused of using famine as a weapon of war? And what did Bernie Sanders say that made even moderate Democrats flinch? And who's really pulling the strings here? Because it sure as heck doesn't look like a democracy anymore. But before we unpack that, let's actually talk about what happened on the Senate floor, because it's important. So picture this. It's midnight, a rare late night vote. Senators are in session, and Bernie Sanders, yes, the man who marched with King, who lost family in the Holocaust, stands up and says, at a time when civilians are being shot for trying to reach food, when extremist settlers are pushing Palestinians from their homes, and when Gaza is starving because of Israeli policy, the United States must stop enabling these atrocities. So what was the result of all this? 24 yeas, 73 nays, and the motion fails. But they tried this time, which is interesting on the Democrats' part. But this brings us to the weapons of war and the war crimes, the $676 million deal. So what was Bernie trying to stop? Well, two arms deals, really. One, 5,000-pound or heavy-duty bombs. Two, 10,000 of fully automatic rifles, combined worth of over $676 million. These aren't defensive tools. These are siege weapons. And according to the U.S. law, if a foreign government uses U.S.-supplied arms to commit human rights violations, we're legally required to cut them off. But guess what? Israelis already done that. Human rights organizations, UN experts, international jurists, all warning that Israeli operations, especially in Gaza, may meet the threshold of war crimes, from starvation to indiscriminate bombing, and yet Congress still says yes. So who gets these rifles? Let's get more specific with this stuff. Those automatic rifles, many of them are set to end up in the hands of police forces controlled by Ben-Gvir, Israel's ultra-nationalist national security minister. So let me make this as plain as possible. This man has openly called for the forced expulsion of Palestinians. He was convicted of supporting terrorism by Israel's own courts. He's also armed extremist settlers in the West Bank, many of whom are driving Palestinians out of their homes under the protection of the Israeli army. And we, the United States, are funding this with your tax dollars. Now, the Democrats who finally flipped, and here's where it gets super interesting. For the first time ever, a majority of Senate Democrats voted against these arms deals. Democrats. Who would have thought they could fight for anything? But the new names on the no list, Angus King from Maine, who said he could no longer support Netanyahu's use of starvation as a weapon, Patty Murray, Tammy Duckworth, Raphael Warnock, Sheldon Whitehouse, even Jack Reed, Senate Armed Services Chair. That's not just symbolic, that's seismic. It signals a real crack in the automatic Israel right or wrong consensus in Washington. But don't celebrate yet, because the resolutions still failed. Now, who are the cowards for the cameras here? And then there are these Democrats who talked big and then just vanished, like Alyssa Slocum. She went on the Colbert Report, joked about being CIA, downplayed the idea of a deep state, and called for common sense on Israel. But when it came time to vote, not even cutting all aid, just offensive weapons, she ghosted. She didn't show. Now, you can't claim to care about human rights on Tuesday and then dodge the vote on Thursday. That's not leadership. That's public relation. And that's embarrassing for her. But the Republican Party, we don't have to even get started on that, right? Let me clear, I'm not part of a team. I'm just going to call it. But for those of you itching to make this partisan, Republicans voted 100% in favor of the arms deal. Not one crossed the aisle. Not one stood up to say, maybe we shouldn't be sending bombs to a military accused of starving civilians. So for every Democrat that deserves roasting, or that I am kind of roasting, understand this. On the other side, Republicans didn't even pretend to have a conscience. It's just calling it like I see it, right? But mockery or mirror, this is where the satire part is a little bit hard to laugh at. But writer Frank Capella posted on a skit that went viral, he pretended to be a centrist Democrat. And he basically said, we need to both stand up for starving Palestinians and have lunch with the person starving them. I believe in balance. Now, it's a joke, but it's also exactly how DC talks. When they're not blocking arms bans, they're taking selfies with Netanyahu. And when they're not signing weapons deals, they're issuing strongly worded letters. And if it weren't life or death, it would be comical. But unfortunately, it's life and death. So the bigger question is, who are we? Here's the real crisis. When Congress votes to fund a war that's killing thousands, when the Senate ignores our own laws about war crimes, when American politicians treat genocide warnings like talking points, you have to ask, are we a democracy? Or are we just a well-dressed arms dealer? And that's where the conversation gets dangerous, because now we're talking about AIPAC. Now we're talking about lobbying, about blackmail, influence, unchecked power. Things no one wants to say out loud, but we feel in our gut and we know is happening. So this vote didn't just expose Congress, it exposes us. We say never again, but when it's the Palestinians, suddenly there's nuance. Suddenly there's context. If a Holocaust survivor stands up and says this is wrong and our response is to shut him down, what does that say about us? And if we let this slide, what's next? But none of this matters if we don't talk about who's cashing in on the next war. And that's where we'll be headed in the next episode and exploring in future episodes for sure. In any event, guys, thank you so much for watching The Baseline. I truly appreciate it. And we'll most certainly catch you in the next round. All right. Cheers, everybody.